Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Hari Hahn, Director of the SNF Agora Institute. For those of you who don't know us, SNF Agora is an academic center and public forum at Johns Hopkins University that is dedicated to improving and expanding civic engagement and informed, inclusive dialogue as the cornerstone of global democracy. I'm very excited to be introducing today's event, which will be a conversation with Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Johns Hopkins President Daniels about the role institutions play in supporting and strengthening democracy. This event is part of the second annual Elijah E. Cummings Democracy and Freedom Festival. Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings created the festival last year in honor of her late husband. Cummings was a staunch defender of democracy, and he advocated tirelessly for the equal opportunity of underrepresented and marginalized Americans, especially at the ballot box. The SNF Agora Institute has been honored to present the festival this year. And now, today's guests. Speaker Pelosi, who is in her 34th year representing San Francisco in Congress, is the 52nd Speaker of the House of Representatives and is the first woman ever to serve in that role. As Speaker, she has been committed to protecting and expanding voting rights, including passing the For the People Act, which aimed to expand access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, and strengthen ethics rules for public servants, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to strengthen and restore parts of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that have been struck down by the Supreme Court. We are especially grateful that Speaker Pelosi could join us for this event, as she served side by side with Congressman Cummings and has described him as Congress's North Star. Of course, Speaker Pelosi was also born and raised in Baltimore, where her father and brother both served as mayor, and so we are delighted to welcome her back, even if only virtually. Speaker Pelosi is joined in conversation by Johns Hopkins University President Daniels.
Speaker Pelosi, I'm truly delighted to welcome such an extraordinary public servant, political trailblazer, and importantly, a Baltimore native and Johns Hopkins honorary degree recipient to this year's Elijah E. Cummings Democracy and Freedom Festival. It's a privilege to talk with you today and to bring some questions from our students.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to be here as a Baltimorean, a native Baltimorean. I take great pride in Johns Hopkins, and as a close friend of Elijah Cummings, I really appreciate the recognition that you're giving him for his greatness, for his patriotism, and for his pride that he took in Baltimore.
As you mentioned, you and Congressman Cummings were not only longtime colleagues in the House of Representatives, but also friends. And so having worked so closely with him and known him so well, how would you describe his legacy? Can you share any stories that epitomize this legacy and the values that he stood so resolutely for?
Well, I'm so pleased that he's getting the recognition that he deserves. I called Elijah my Baltimore brother. We were very close, and we spoke shorthand to each other about the issues that we cared about. I would say that in addition to his values and his vision for our country about fairness and justice and the rest, and his effectiveness about it, he also had courage to make the fight. And that sometimes is the difference between those with commitment and conviction and the rest. The courage makes the difference. Nobody ever doubted the courage of Elijah Cummings.
You've devoted your career to public service and to enacting change within and through democratic institutions. And yet we know we're living in a moment in which citizens are increasingly skeptical of institutions. We hear from students who say they feel very distant from formal democratic institutions, including government, and doubt their capacity to act on behalf of the common good. How can we bridge the gap and make clear the importance of political institutions like the U.S. Congress? And what do they mean both to you and to our democracy?
Well, first, let me just say that our country has been blessed by the activism of young people, of their resistance to the status quo. Right from our own revolution, people were very young then. When we talk about the civil rights movement and the march over the Selma Bridge, which we observed the anniversary of just a couple of weeks ago, that was led by children, high school students who wanted their parents and their teachers to have the right to vote. And they instituted that march and invited Dr. King, John Lewis, and others to participate. The resistance to the war in Vietnam was largely led by young people. So this is not anything to be concerned about. It's something to celebrate. But as you say, there's no question that there is resistance to institutions. And that is a responsibility that we all have, to make sure people understand the future, especially young people, belongs to them. And that, again, nothing less than the whole planet is at risk. Nothing less than our democracy is at risk at this time. And that their role in all of this is very important. And again, it's not just young people as we have known them before. It's young people of color, young women, young men, LGBTQ, the beautiful diversity of it all. But not to, shall we say, well, why don't they care more about this or that? No. Why aren't we communicating better to them what their role is in all of this? Elijah used to say of children, because he and I had shared that passion for children, he would say, children are our messengers to a future we will never see. And of course, we have to prepare children, young people, for that future, but also prepare a future worthy of the aspirations of our children, of our young people.
So, as you think about this moment and your role as a political leader and the role that Elijah played, it's clear that not only is there distrust in our political institutions, but just a deep level of really rancorous polarization that we're experiencing in this country. And so again, to young people who are looking at Congress and other institutions and just seeing the extent to which the kind of nastiness that they're being exposed to in so many other settings is now being replicated in our political branches of government. Again, how can we show that progress is possible and that there's better ways to resolve conflict than in this sort of deep and really poisonous rancor that we're experiencing?
Well, if I may just say that when we say conflict, we're talking about obstruction on the part of a certain element of our country. The Republican Party has been a great institution for America. The grand old party has done so much for our country. But they have been hijacked by a cult of personality, which has been very dangerous. There have been in our country those who have had their, shall we say, anti-this, that, or the other, anti-Semitism, anti-black, anti-LGBT, anti-woman, all the rest. The former president did not invent that, but he galvanized it, and he fed the flame, and he talked about big lie and fake news and things like that. He was a very dangerous person. It is not for us to be fear-mongers and just say, look how horrible he was. We have to show people another path. Elijah said, and I know he's doing this right now, when we're dancing with the angels, let us acknowledge what we did to protect our democracy. And we have a responsibility to do that. So again, many of us have been involved in the political arena for a long time. We've had our disagreements over issues. We've found our common ground. We've had confidence in what we believe in, humility to listen and learn for other points of view, whether it's generational, geographic, philosophical, or whatever. But now it's something quite different. And that's the fight we have to make, but not by becoming like them, but just by trying to honor the traditions and values of our country, a great country. We could withstand one term of the former president, not two. Now, again, you asked me that question, and so I'm telling you what I believe. And I believe that there are many Republicans in the country who would like to take back their party, and I say to them, take it back. But they said we can't beat them in the primary. You have to beat them in the general, and then we can go back to our disagreements in philosophy of the role of government and the rest, as our founders intended.
Final question, and perhaps to leave on an optimistic note. As much as we talk about paralysis and discord and the challenges both to democracy here and abroad, and particularly obviously seeing this played out on a daily basis in Ukraine, can you actually give us a sense of some good news in terms of progress that we've been able to make on a bipartisan basis. When you look back over the last couple of years, what are the moments of which you're most proud, where you really saw the capacity of politicians from all stripes to be able to transcend their differences and put the country first and really make progress possible for the country?
Well, we just have passed a big bill for keeping government open and sharing our differences of opinion, but coming to agreement on how we meet the needs of the American people. One other bill that is the president just signed is the bill about the Postal Service. Why I mention that is because there have been differences of opinion, and yet we came together with a big bipartisan vote. That bill was originated by Elijah Cummings. Elijah Cummings is the epitome and the personification of what you just asked. He always tried to find common ground. He always was respectful of other points of view, but he was always firm in his values. So he was highly respected. When we named the room for him in the Capitol, a room in honor of Elijah Cummings, it was strongly bipartisan, the celebration of his life, because he was a legislator and he wanted to get things done in a bipartisan way that would have sustainability over time. So now we have some legislation that talks about Americans' competition, very bipartisan. The bill we just passed, very bipartisan. Where we have a major difference of opinion, though, and a place that Elijah fought so hard, is on our electoral system. We cannot get them to support the Voting Rights Act or the Freedom to Vote Act that undermines our democracy by suppressing the vote and undermines our democracy by nullifying elections. So again, we have to recognize the challenges, be respectful of different views, and again, be hopeful to make progress and have empathy for all points of view in our society. But Elijah, we miss him. I miss him all the time, not only personally as my Baltimore brother, but I miss him because he would be so effective right now in his strong voice. We can do better, Elijah Cummings. That's what he said about our children.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And of course, for this audience, Dr. Pelosi, honorary degree graduate from 2009, I should say, my first university commencement. You set a very high bar, as I said before to you, before we started this conversation, but you set a very high bar during that commencement ceremony for all of the commencement speakers who have followed since, at least during my term. I thank you for the wonderful, inspired leadership you've brought to the country and for the passion that you have for democracy. And again, very much appreciate your taking the time from your busy schedule today to honor our dear son of the city of Baltimore, Elijah Cummings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just this may not be part of our interview, but I do want to say that as a Baltimorean, I take great pride in Johns Hopkins and what you're doing for health and progress in so many ways in research. But one thing that I learned from Hopkins, in addition to the pride I take in my honorary degree, was humility. And when I was 18 years old, I went to summer school at Hopkins for advanced math. Oh my God.
You know what, Madam Speaker? I didn't know on top of all your other very significant achievements that you actually were a CTY student as well. So that makes the connection to Baltimore and to Hopkins that much more special. Again, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.